Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Alexis Archinsky. Dr. Archinsky received their doctorate in counseling psychology from the University of Utah and is currently serving as a staff psychologist at the university's Counseling Center. They also serve as a coordinator for the Mindfulness Center and the Change Coalition undergraduate internship program. Their research and teaching focuses on three themes: examining how practitioners engage in multicultural practices, employing empowerment-based approaches, and promoting social justice. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Archinsky in leading our session on mindful wellness.
Hey everybody, it's lovely to be here today, and I'll go ahead and get started by sharing my screen, and we're going to be using some stuff that I've never used before, so we'll see the fun times that we have with that. But first things first, if you could go ahead and go to this website, joinpd.com, and use the code that's provided, IWGQQM, to link to it. Later in this presentation, I'll have some questions and you can give your live responses if desired. No pressure. And I'll give folks a couple of seconds to get connected to that. Since I don't know about you all, but I can't necessarily focus on two things at once on Friday afternoon. So do your thing. We've got about 7 people connected, and let's try. I know that there's quite a number of people here, so let's try and get at least about 15 or 20 people in there. So again, the link has been, or the website has been shared in the chat, and the website is joinpd.com, joinpd.com. And the code is IWGQQM. You can totally use your phone. Part of mindfulness-based stress management is noticing when we make mistakes and laughing at ourselves for having a moment of being human. So Angela, thank you, welcome, you're human. I'm glad you're here. All right. Other folks are welcome to join as we go, and the website is in the chat as well as the code. So I hope more folks join as we go. Again, you can log in with your phone or any other device that you're on right now, because presumably everybody is here on some sort of a device. All right, so today we're going to be talking about mindfulness and stress management. And part of that process will be the following learning objectives that just give us a sense of where we're going in space. So we're going to identify the basic components of mindfulness. Those include the micro skills that come with mindfulness in the particular approach that I'm going to share with you today, as well as the basic philosophical components of mindfulness, which are very important, which I'll be illustrating throughout the presentation. We'll apply mindfulness towards stress management in the moment with each other, and we'll demonstrate those mindfulness skills through application. And the invitation is to think, feel through moments of stress that you might have in your day-to-day life, which could be happening right this very moment. So there you go. And before we take a moment of pause, actually, I'd like everybody to join me in a couple of norms that we can build in this space. Now, I recognize we're not talking with each other like we might in a class or in our workspaces or practicum or internships. but let's create an environment of confidentiality and non-judgmental acceptance. And what I mean by that is that let's leave whatever people share out when I ask for people to respond to questions. Let's leave that information here, leave their stories, leave their names, leave everything else here in this space so that people can share whatever they want to share without fear of judgment. And let's take up a non-judgmental space with each other. And what I mean by that is holding our judgments loosely that we might have of others, and in particular of ourselves. So offering ourselves the same kind of grace that we might offer other people when they slip up, get distracted, or make mistakes. And so it is my hope that everybody will take me up on these principles as we go. Okay. Just apply them. When you notice a judgment, notice it, give it a name, and let it pass. So let's take a moment of pause with each other, because I'm guessing you're at a conference. I'm guessing you had one thing before this and you have another thing after this, and you probably have homework to do and a semester coming and some jobs or something. And so let's take a moment to just be with each other. So if you can, close your eyes. If you can remain present and engaged, close those eyes. If you can't, let them stay open. And fix your attention on a spot about 12 to 18 inches in front of you. And just begin to pause in this moment in your day. You're simply going to stop whatever it was you were doing before this moment and let go of anything that might happen after this moment and take a few breaths. Breathing into a count of 4, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, and breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. One more time, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, and breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. And with your exhale, breathe out through your mouth with a sigh. You've arrived and you're here today. And hopefully you'll get a moment of relief in your time and space with us today, with each other today. So I'm going to invite folks to respond to this question in the application that you've associated yourself with on your device. So please write your response to this question. What does mindfulness mean to you? We've got a good number of responses, so I'll start putting them up on the screen so we can see. Mindfulness means being present in the moment, being present. I'll come back to the first one, don't worry. Peaceful mind, connecting with myself and feeling comfortable with. I'm going to pause for a second. I might be getting ahead of myself with this application. So we'll give people time to finish their responses. Connecting with myself and feeling comfortable with my emotions, to be mentally healthy and to not be always so stressed out and to be calm. Being present. I'm hearing some themes happening in this so far. Being aware of my thoughts as they come up. Awareness. Being aware of others' feelings. Indeed, part of mindfulness is social awareness. Peace and understanding. A clear mind, no worries, and peace with oneself. Being aware of oneself and one's presence. Take time to just exist. Heck yeah, we're going to do that again later too. Being calm and collected, and being calm with us ourselves being uncollected and messy at times as well. So holding two things at once. Taking consideration of our surrounding environment, peace and mental relaxation, quiet mind, communicate with yourself. These are lovely responses, everybody. Thank you for adding these for us. And this first one, mindfulness is being present in the moment and being in tune with yourself. Beautiful responses, everybody. So thank you for that. And I'll go ahead and add to these a couple of layers to an understanding of what mindfulness might mean. And mindfulness means many different things, actually. And before I go into any further depth, I'll name some of the ground that we're standing on. So as you may or may not be aware, Mindfulness is a practice that's existed for a long, long time, thousands of years, emerging from Eastern and indigenous practices. And these practices have been culturally appropriated by mostly white men in the West and have been used for the purposes of personal well-being. And the background, the cultural background that we pulled these practices from has larger feelers than that, larger implications. So as some of you talked about, it also means being in tune with our surrounding environment and the people we're in relationship with or cohabiting on this earth with. And so it's very much about personal and community liberation through the act of being present in the moment. So just naming that for a moment in our space together. So in terms of what mindfulness is, so it's paying attention to the present moment. Some of you, ding, 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 you got that totally right. There's not a lot of ways to get mindfulness wrong, FYI. It's ungluing our experiences from culturally born self-judging and self-limiting thoughts. All of us have agreements with the broader worlds from which we've been socialized. And those agreements sometimes tell us that we have inborn limitations and also take up critiques of us and how we move in the world. And mindfulness can help us let go of that a bit and formulate new cultural agreements for which we agree instead. Mindfulness is also, as some of you rightly stated, being with emotional states and using those emotions as information. Our broader worlds teach us to actually discount our bodies and our emotions as sources of important and wise information, and instead locate intelligence in the mind and in the rational mind. And so what mindfulness can do is can help us to have a broader space of understanding of the kind of information that we can use in our day-to-day lives. So ding, ding, ding for those of you who noticed that. No one in here is more right than the other. Just, hey, somebody mentioned that. Mindfulness also allows us to forego automatic ways of being. So instead of like being an autopilot and being on the way home from work and suddenly being at home and having no idea how we got there, mindfulness can give us the opportunity or the choice to be present on that whole drive home and to use it as a moment of peace in the space in between things that we're leaving and going towards. Mindfulness is also a practice of letting go of future fears and past problems. So we don't have to live in the future or the past, but can instead live right here, right now. And the right here, right now might be dang uncomfortable, but we can still be here anyway and contend with what is in the moment and give ourselves space to be with it. And mindfulness also teaches us that when we need a break from the present moment and we need to distract or self-soothe, we can also do that too, and that's okay. And lastly, mindfulness is being in the present with a calm, curious mind, a playful beginner's mind. So if you think about a kid who's never run around in the park before and is kicking a soccer ball, they might laugh and be playful when they miss the ball or they fall down, and they might cry too. But us adults, we have a tendency to get really hard on ourselves when we make mistakes or don't meet our expectations. And so mindfulness allows us to be curious with our reactions to ourselves and to be playful at the same time. So what is mindfulness? These are some helpful micro skills that we can use to take care of ourselves when we're in a stressful moment, and to also take care of ourselves when we're in a moment of relief. And these practices, as are stated on the screen, are observe, describe, and participate. What I mean by this is observation is turning towards the present moment without attachment to our experience or our reaction to our experience. So let's say that right here, right now, you notice yourself getting distracted by stressors that are happening in your day-to-day life. Like it's pulling on you and pulling your attention away. What the mindfulness micro skill of observe can tell us to do is when we have a mindful moment that we've gotten distracted by a stressor and that's taken us out of the present moment, we can notice where we've gone and just notice, oh, I'm thinking about that assignment that I have, or oh, that job task that I have, and noticing that. Okay, that's the first step to helping ourselves change our stress reactivity and instead respond to stress. Describe is the act of when a feeling or a thought arises or a distraction happens, putting it into words to acknowledge it without judgment or criticism. So for example, if you're distracted by something that's stressful in this present moment here with me, you might notice where you've gone and then you might name it. I'm thinking, I'm worrying, I'm planning, or whatever it might be. Okay. And then lastly, after you've had that mindful moment, you have a choice. You have a choice to continue down the rabbit hole of that thought, and there's no judgment there because sometimes we just got to do it. And you also have a choice to return to your experience in the moment by getting immersed in it, getting lost in it for a little while. So again, the micro skills of mindfulness are to observe what's happening for us in the present moment, to describe it, put it to words, and therefore hold space for it for a moment, and then to participate actively in our present moment, or to at least give ourselves the choice to do that. These can be used when we get distracted by stressful things, or when we have strong emotions or difficult thoughts or whatever it might be. We can observe it, name it, and then come back to whatever it is that we're doing. Next are some really important philosophical tenets of mindfulness. These are just three, there's many, and they've kind of been inserted throughout the presentation so far. But the how to do mindfulness, if you forgive the syntax of that statement, involves non-judgment, one mindfulness, and effectiveness. So we've talked about non-judgment here a little bit, but we humans, part of the way that we've survived for so long in our vulnerable little bodies is that we have developed the ability to judge our circumstances. And presently, that judgment can take many different forms. It can take pleasant directions, it can take most unpleasant and critical directions, and it can be rather neutral. It can be leaning in or being averse to an experience. And what mindfulness asks us to do is to hold our judgments really, really loosely, because our judgments are not facts. Our judgments likely have far larger socio-political implications of their origin, meaning that we likely learned it from somewhere, from our broader worlds and from our relationships with people, and they don't necessarily mean truth. Like as an example, we live in a world where we're taught to be hyper productive all the time and to always do things well, perfectionism. And that perspective can lead us to believe that when we're taking a moment of pause or enjoying time with friends or just laying on the floor in a puddle, that we're not doing a good job with our lives in that moment. And so mindfulness can help us to pull away from that, from those culturally born judgments, and instead lean towards being with ourselves in a present moment with an affectionate gaze. Okay, so non-judgment. And so non-judgment in and of itself is holding our experiences and our judgments of our experiences quite loosely, and noticing without evaluation and with a playful attitude. So another way to look at it is if we notice a judgment of ourselves or a critique of ourselves that we're having in a moment. I'm not being very articulate is one that I'm having right at this particular moment. When we notice that, we can also be playful with ourselves. Oh, I know where that's coming from, because I believe that the only way to love myself is to be perfect all the time. And that's no way to live, right? Next is one mindfulness. So I didn't create a prompt for this, so forgive me, but I'd like everybody to take a moment and to acknowledge from themselves if you believe that you might be good at multitasking. Usually it's about 90% of the room, people think that they're pretty good at multitasking. And what research suggests is that as humans, we're actually really bad at it. we're really good at sequential processing. So we can do, what happens when we do multiple things at once is that we're actually doing one thing at a time and doing those one things at a time really badly. So for example, let's say that in this moment, you're eating a meal, you're checking your email inbox, you're responding to text messages, and you're watching this presentation. Generally speaking, that means when you're, and there's no judgment here, folks, we all do it. But if we're checking a text message, we're likely missing pieces of the presentation. If we are if we're watching a presentation and eating at the same time, we're likely getting less delight out of the food that we're eating, and et cetera, and so forth. And so what mindfulness suggests is that we instead do one thing at a time. So in this moment, you may decide that you need to take a couple minutes to eat and tune out the presentation. More power to you. Or you may decide that you're full in this moment and you can turn your attention to the presentation. Or you may decide that you have to take a 30-second brain break, because we all need those moments to respond to a text message to a friend that you care about. So again, one thing at a time. And lastly is effectiveness. And what this particular philosophical tenet means is do what works or needs to be done versus what we think we should, quote unquote, be doing. And an example of this that I use in my day-to-day life is that I have a tendency to write, funnily enough, we're at my workspace. So I like to write lots of to-do lists. Oh, you probably can't see it, but lots of to-do lists with really little tiny written words that are way too long and have lots of things to do. And I tend to target the things on my list that I find to be the most difficult first, because I like to end on a pleasant note or an easy note. However, on days when I'm feeling stressed or I'm struggling with some emotionally laden thing in my life, like pandemic and not being able to see my family, for example, fairly easy one to reach, it may not be possible for me to attack the difficult things first, the ones that take the most attention first. So instead, I might do what works and switch the order and do some easy tasks first to help me feel a sense of mastery over my situation and to distract myself a little bit if I need to get some stuff done, even though I have emotional stuff happening, which likely happens for all of us all the time. And once I've been able to tick off the small things, then I can move towards the larger order things. And maybe the next day I'll feel differently and I can start with those difficult things. So let's practice an activity together that helps to coalesce these ideas together. This is a stop meditation. You can search it on your web, on your search engine right this minute. Generally speaking, this meditation is very, very short, a couple of minutes long. I'm going to draw it out for you all because part of what I was asked to do was to do a little bit of meditation practice with you all to give you a moment of pause in your day versus filling your minds with more things. So let's take a minute to practice this stop meditation. And this meditation gives us an opportunity to practice the micro skills that we just learned together and the philosophical tenets. This meditation can be a helpful way to slow down and check in with ourselves. A couple of reminders as we go into it. Mindfulness, no offense to the person who said it in the comments, but mindfulness is not a blank mind. Mindfulness is allowing ourselves to be whatever we are in a given moment and to be curious and kind to ourselves in those moments when we're maybe feeling a little bit more all over the place. Okay. It teaches us to respond to ourselves in times of stress versus to react harshly or quickly in those times of stress. So we'll practice that together by entertaining different sources of information in the moment and checking in. Okay. So again, get settled in your seat. If you're not in a seat or you're sitting on the floor, more power to you. You could even lay down if you want to. Nobody's going to know. If you prefer to stand because you might get too sleepy and fall asleep, go for it. Whatever you want to do is your thing. But get comfortable in your seat and take in your surroundings for a moment. Begin to look around your surroundings and notice where your entrances and exits are. And begin to take in anything that has the color purple. And then begin to close your eyes if you can feel present and engaged with your eyes closed, or allow your gaze to drift to a spot 12 to 18 inches in front of you. Notice the sounds that are in your space, pointing your attention to the sounds furthest away from you first, and then tracing those sounds closer and closer to you, ending on the sounds within you, perhaps the sound of your breath or your heartbeat. And now, once again, take a moment to stop and take a pause from your day. In this moment, you don't have to be anywhere or do anything or learn anything. You just get to be. And now take a few intentional breaths. You may decide to observe the sensations of your breath as the breath enters and exits your nostrils, or the sensations of your ribs expanding and contracting. Or you may decide to count out your breath, like we learned a little while ago. But take a moment to breathe intentionally. And if it feels good, let out a sigh of relief with each exhale. And now, without any judgment or any analysis of what's wrong, begin to observe your thoughts. You may notice multiple thoughts happening all at once, messily moving through your mind. You may notice one thought happening one after another. You may have a broken record in your head, or by turning your attention to your mind, you may notice nothing. All of these things are okay and all right in this moment, but just observe your thoughts. Just noticing what's present. If you notice that you start to go down some rabbit holes with your thoughts, or you start telling stories in this moment, notice that tendency. Give it a name, whatever's happening, planning, worrying, and redirect your attention back to just noticing whatever pops into your mind in a given moment as they come and go, stick around, and repeat. Now, I invite you to shift your awareness to observe any and all physical sensations that are occurring in and on your body. These sensations may be on the surface, so like the feeling of your clothes on your skin, the feeling of air brushing up against the little furs on your arms and legs. These sensations may be deep within, sensations of muscle tension or relaxation, sensations of hunger or digestion, sensations of breathing, heartbeat, pain, relief. Whatever it is, just notice in this moment. And when you notice the urge to critique any sensations you have on your body, notice that tendency. Give it a name and kindly move away from that thought and back to just observing with a gentle, affectionate gaze. Now, begin to shift your awareness to observe any and all emotions you might be having in this particular moment. Again, you may notice nothing. That's fine. You may notice emotional purity or one present emotion at this time: frustration, sadness, tiredness. Or you may notice many emotions happening at once or one after another. All are just fine. Notice and be with whatever's present, giving it a little space to just be here. Now, I invite you to shift your awareness to observe your spirit or energy. This may be a very physical sensation of how much energy you got in this particular moment. It also may be quite ethereal. Just notice whatever it is that you notice in this moment. And as we close this activity together today, begin to suspend all effort. Don't have to attend to anything right now. Begin to open your eyes with a soft gaze. And begin to proceed into the next moment with me, with awareness and presence. Thank you, Alexia. Now, part of mindfulness-based stress reduction is taking some moments of pause to reflect. So I invite you all to begin to submit some responses to this question using the Pear Deck app website that you've already associated yourself with. But begin to just kind of quickly describe whatever it is that you noticed. Folks may notice things that are pleasant and unpleasant, things that are neutral, whatever it might be. But feel free to share that. And just to be transparent and giving a little bit of time so folks can put those responses in there. And I'm going to take a little drink of water because notice that I might need it. Lots of different thoughts. I couldn't relax. This is actually quite common, especially when if you haven't been exposed to mindfulness or meditation much before. Many folks will notice that their minds are all over the place and it's hard to just be in the present moment. And a reminder, mindfulness-based meditation is not necessarily relaxing, although it can be, as Alexia highlighted, so peaceful. It can also be a moment to notice. Yes, we're going to be moving to the Q&A in just a moment. Many folks will notice that over time and with practice, on a regular, if not daily practice, we can start to relax more into it. And we can start to learn things to help us relax when we notice or learn when we sit down to practice that we're overwhelmed. Many folks tend to fall asleep. If we tend to be in a space of pretty consistent and chronic stress, our bodies are on high alert all the time. And when we start to do a mindfulness or meditation practice, our bodies are like, oh, it's time to go to sleep then. And so we might get sleepy. Noticing our breath, noticing fatigue, a really important thing to notice. Maybe a nap is needed after this, some calm. Sometimes folks get that right off the bat, and that's really lovely. We might notice more acutely our senses. And again, difficult to find concentration, difficulty quieting the mind. Noticing discomfort in different areas of our lives. And noticing sadness around a lost pet or a pet, not a lost pet, just a pet that is sick. So thank you everybody for sharing your responses. These are all quite typical in my experience, and so you're not alone. And sometimes with practice, we can get better skilled at being concentrated with ourselves and also kind of letting it go if we have an off day, because we're all allowed to have those. All right, so let's talk about questions and answers. I've got 3 that we pre-approved, but we'll kind of let that go for right now. Are there any questions in the Q&A? I don't even know how to get to that.
I can read them for you. Why don't we stop sharing the screen and go into dialogue mode?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, well, as we're waiting maybe for some of those to come in, I had a question. Where can we find other places to get resources for more exercises, more mindfulness exercises?
That is a really great question. And what I will do, I probably should have had that prepared, but I didn't do that today. So what I will do is, where is that window? There it is. So Tara Brach is a mindfulness-based practitioner, Tarabrach, and she has a lot of practices on her website. There's also a website. And a practitioner called Chris Germer that has a lot of self-compassion based practices. And there's selfcompassion.org that has some wonderful practices as well. And there's about 70,000 different apps that are even free that have mindfulness-based practices that can help lead us through practices in the moment, like the Calm app and other ones like it. Those are some places to get us started. And it looks like Angela might be doing some research to get those added to the website, to the chat box.
I think I found 2. I'm missing that 3rd one though.
I'll get it for you.
Perfect.
If people don't mind watching this middle-aged queer try and figure out a website for a second. Here's, oh, you've already got that one. Whoopsie.
The one I'm
There we
missing.
go. I found it. Oh, well, dang it. I sent it to you, Angela. You can share to the group.
There you go, everyone.
Well, thank you. I love my haircut too. We can all thank my partner for it. I have an in-home hairstylist.
Moving on, I have a question from Alexia really quickly. How many meditation sessions would you recommend as a pre-health student per week? I know she also asked about apps or platforms, but yeah, 3 in the chat for everyone.
Yeah. And again, apps. I don't know that I necessarily recommend these ones, but these are commonly used ones that I hear about for folks. These include the Liberate Act if you're a BIPOC individual, if you identify as Black, Indigenous, person of color. Headspace is a great application, has lots of different things. Insight Timer is another. And they offer free and subscription-based ones. And then in terms of how many practices a week, I think I'll kind of add some layers to the answer to that question. So mindfulness can be practiced in formal practices, like the one we did today, the stop meditation. And there's lots of other formal ones that you can find on the websites that can be anywhere from 5 to 45 minutes in length, which I know sounds crazy, but just think about it. 45 minutes of a moment of pause for you to get a daily vacation. It's a really good idea. But generally speaking, the recommendation that I have for folks is to work towards a daily practice in some form. Mixing together formal practices where you're kind of taking a pause from your day and going to your mindful place or mindful practice. But there's also in the moment ones we can do. Like when we have a mindful moment that we are stressed or overwhelmed or judging or critical, we can take a moment to notice it, observe it, give it a name, and turn back to our lives with more of a gentle awareness. So that's a mindfulness-based practice of redirection that can help us in any given moment to be kinder to ourselves when we're in stress. And there's also ways to practice mindfulness with just our everyday things that we do. So if you are an avid exerciser, try it. You could try being mindful when you're exercising. And what I mean by that is instead of having your headphones in, take them out and do your run or your bike ride or your walk or your yoga sesh, really noticing what's coming up for you. And what we can often learn when we're in exercise is we notice our instantaneous reactions to stress. Do you tend to get angry when things get hard? Do you tend to get sad when things get hard? Do you tend to get really anxious when things get hard? Noticing that in your inner dialogue, and again, practicing mindful redirection to help ourselves just come back to that movement in the moment. And some other ways to do it are to insert mindfulness into one component of our morning ritual. So could be with your cup of coffee or your shower or whatever it might be, but kind of turning off all the things and just redirecting ourselves back to the activity over and over again. So those are just some examples, but generally doing what works for you versus what I am telling you you should do right now, because it's not what I'm saying. Working towards a daily, regular practice of mindfulness and making it fit into your life.
I like that answer. Moving on, I saw a really good question. What would you recommend? How would you recommend using mindfulness to combat insecurities or imposter syndrome?
Perfect. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, by the way, folks. So as a human that has lots of insecurities, and as a human that also struggles with imposter syndrome, depending on our identity statuses and the ways we've been socialized into those identities, we may be more or less on the margins of society. And that means we often inherit a lot of internalized shame and baggage from those bigger, broader cultures. Now, that doesn't mean that folks that are quite privileged don't have insecurities. In fact, they do, because it's built into the system. But part of using mindfulness is to, when we notice again, part of mindfulness is when we notice something happening for ourselves, being curious about it instead of seeing it as truth. And so when we notice when we notice a moment where we're feeling like we shouldn't be in this role, or we don't have enough education, or we're not competent enough, or somebody soon is going to find out that we don't belong here. These may be messages that folks have in their head. When we have that moment of noticing that thought is there, that's when we can notice it and be curious about it. Where did I learn that from? Because I'm guessing you didn't make it up. You learned it from somewhere else. And also being curious of how much do you buy into that belief system? So instead of buying into it, being like, what's my truth in this matter? Am I still a trainee? Am I on the journey? And therefore I don't have to be perfect. And even when we're licensed and way far along in the journey, we're never going to be perfect or know everything anyway. Are there ways that I can counter this belief that might be more self-compassionate and honest, for example? So questioning as well as being curious about. And another practice is, again, mindful redirection. When we have a critiquing thought in our minds that seems to be based more in socialization or how we've internalized our broader worlds, in that moment, we can decide to intentionally redirect away from it. I don't have to choose to listen to you right now. I'm going to go ahead and do this other thing that I find way more enjoyable. Thank you very much, mind. So we don't have to let it take rent in our minds, but we can notice it and acknowledge it and give ourselves space to contend with the feelings that come with it without buying into it. I hope that helps. That's a start anyway.
That's a great response, definitely. Audience members, please also remember that if you have any questions that come up, you can also raise your hand and ask yourself. But we have another really great question that kind of went with what you just said. How has mindfulness helped you personally? Can you share any experiences with it?
Absolutely. Kind of a broad general thing I can say about it, which is not meant to be like a promotion for mindfulness, but hey, I'm here talking to you about mindfulness, so I must believe in it in some way, right? But one thing that I have noticed in my life, in my journey with mindfulness, which is extended off and on for more than a decade, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect at it, nor does that mean that I always am in a daily practice. So I'm still a human being. But what I have learned is when the practice is regular, when it is a part of my day-to-day life in formal and informal ways, I feel calmer. I feel like I give myself more latitude to F up, excuse my not quite swearing, although I wanted to. It also gives me a better ability to be compassionate towards myself and to others. So I notice notable differences when I'm in that regular practice. Another thing that I've learned about mindfulness, I think I'm straying from the question a bit here, but another thing I've noticed about mindfulness is that the way it plays out in my life, in my regular practice, depends at different points in my life. There's been points where it's been more associated with my physical activities. Like right now I have a really regular practice of yoga, and I practice mindfulness while I'm practicing, and I practice mindfulness in the shavasana, or the meditation afterwards. And then I work to build in little moments of pause throughout my day. So lots of informal practices. There have been other points in my life where I've had a thriving sitting meditation practice where I block out 15, 20, 45 minutes a day to meditate. And I have learned to be in acceptance of and to be grateful for whatever form mindfulness takes, because it gives me relief. Our culture tends to teach us that there's a very rigid way of doing things, and it's the more productive way. And I choose instead to let myself be where I'm at and be in flex with that practice as it takes different forms in day-to-day life. That's me anyway. Did I answer the question at all, Angela, or did I miss it?
No, I think you got it. I think the most important thing is how you've incorporated it into your life reasonably in a way that other people can go ahead and do it too. And I think that's what's important.
Yeah.
We love stirring answers because I feel like they answer more things that no one thought to ask.
Yeah. I think we
Uh,
might be at time.
we still have another 5 minutes if you'd like to go
Okay.
ahead
Sure.
to
Yeah,
fill the
I'm fine with that.
time. I think we could maybe have another question or two. Um, Someone asked, would you recommend journaling or any sort of writing for mindfulness?
Absolutely. Um, on the, I believe it's on the selfcompassion.org website. She has prompts for journaling for self-compassion, and quite, in my opinion, quite, and I'm not an expert necessarily, I would never entertain myself to be that, but my belief is that anything can be mindfulness as long as we are present and intentionally coming back to that moment to moment experience over and over again. And part of what journaling can do, at least in my experience, because I go in and out of having a thriving journaling practice as part of my self-care. Somebody, Jacinta, did you have something to say?
No.
Okay. Hopefully I pronounced your name right. What journaling can allow us to do is it can allow us to just have a freebie moment where we just kind of write down all the stuff that's in our brains. And it can also be a moment where we do that mindful curiosity and questioning process that I talked about earlier when we try to challenge our own negative belief systems. And so journaling can very much help to augment or be its own mindfulness-based practice. Totally support that.
I love journaling. It's a great calming, it has a great calming effect on me personally, so would recommend. A little bit more of a specific question. Rana asks, I apologize if I mispronounced that, but how can I use mindfulness if it is so hard for me to calm myself? And when I try to be more chill for once, I become lazy and might stop working out or even showering and all of that.
So I'm hearing, I could be wrong. I'm not here to like suggest anything about your lived experiences, Rana, but sometimes when we start to do things that are relaxing, we might notice that we back way the heck off. And what I mean by that is we might be a pendulum person. So we're either all in pushing full tilt or we're all off doing nothing. And that might suggest to us that our regular way of being, where we're going hard all the time, might be pushing us past our limits. So part of what mindfulness can do is can help us to move from a pendular kind of way of being or an all or nothing kind of way of being, and noticing where our limits are over time. So noticing when our safety signals are being thrown out by our bodies, minds, hearts, and spirits earlier in the process, so we don't have to get to full tilt overwhelmed before we back off and then we start to completely pull away from our lives. There's a book out there. I'm going to name it wrong, but I think even if I name it wrong, you'll still find it. But Laziness Does Not Exist. It's not the right name, but it's something like that. Has a yellow and orange and pink cover.
You're right on the dot.
Yeah. And the things that you're talking about that you experience when you start to give yourself a break of completely backing off and having trouble with hygiene, having trouble with taking care of your day-to-day life, sleeping all the time, those can actually be symptoms of being overworked. And so my invitation is to maybe do a little mindful study and read that book, or to take a step back from yourself and notice the ways that you might be pushing yourself into overwork instead. And mindfulness might actually help you to get there. So that's kind of gets around the question that you asked, Rana, but I hope it kind of gives you some direction.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chinsky. It looks like our time is up, but thank you so much for joining us and giving us so much information and so many good tips and exercises to end our Friday evening. Audience members, stay tuned for our last session of volunteering abroad, the Africa Mercy. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone.